Hi, I'm Meg Riley here in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it's always snow and we don't talk about it in the winter, but it's great to be here with some people for whom snow is very exciting today. We're also going to be talking to Heather Vickery, who's the Senior Associate for Outreach, Enrollment and Administration with the College for Social Justice, a joint project of the UUA and the UUSC. But before we do that, I'd like the regulars to introduce ourselves, and we might just talk for a few minutes about things going on right now.
Hi, I'm Aisha Hauser in Seattle, and we do have snow, and it's only an inch, and we do have to talk about it because it rarely snows here. So that's where I am.
I'm Christina Rivera. I'm joining you from Charlottesville, Virginia, where we had a record-setting heat wave yesterday. It was over 80 degrees in February, which is just not right. So yeah, it's been interesting weather-wise here.
This is Jessica. I'm also in Seattle with the snow, and it's, late February. This isn't supposed to happen here at either, so it's weirding me out. I'm on Twitter. I'm in the YouTube chat. I am on Facebook with hashtag the VUU. So look me up and send me any questions, and I'll pass it along to our hosts and our guest. And then I'm going to go behind the chalice.
So before we turn to Heather, I did just want to acknowledge the moment we're in the U.S., which is another shooting in another school. There are many, many of them that we've all seen maps going around with how many of them there are. And then we're seeing the students amazingly stand up. And one of the things okay, that's ableist. We're seeing the students speak up. We're seeing the students get active. And we're seeing them get a whole lot of attention paid to them. I watched some of the town hall last night on CNN, and that's wonderful. I'm amazed by them. I'm impressed by them. I'm delighted that they're doing what they're doing. And I'm really struck with the difference between what's happened with them and what's happened in some other places when young people have been courageous and spoken up about injustice. And I am the parent of one of those young people, so maybe biased. My own child got very active after police killed several different Black men here, and nothing ever happened to the police. They were never held accountable. And my kid was beat up repeatedly by the police and shot at by a white supremacist, and no movie stars and no town halls were held. No politicians showed up to talk about what it meant. And, especially as we hear about let's put more police into the schools, let's put more guns into the schools, we know who that will impact in very negative ways. And so, the whole conversation, I've said on Facebook, I have a commitment not to post snarky, cynical things. And every day I've been writing things and deleting them, And it's really, really hard this morning when I saw that the Florida legislature, while they refused to pass any new legislation in any way restricting assault weapons, did pass legislation that all high schools should now say, "In God we trust." I'm not going to say anything snarky about it because I think it speaks for itself. How about other folks? How are you doing?
The other thing they did was pass something against porn. And it was like, wow, okay. So, and to your point, Meg, about who this is going to affect, the shooters have been white and male, and they're not going to be the first ones who are going to be suspected or targeted. And we know that by facts and statistics. And so we can go down a really more super dangerous road if we just start arming teachers, and people are just going to leave the teaching profession. Is what's going to happen, and we're going to turn our schools into prisons. And so hopefully we can turn that around before it happens. And the celebrity, it's because of our culture, it's cool to support, really courageous white kids, and they're great. And I think some are Latina. I think Emma Gonzalez, I'm going to take a leap and say she is Latinx, and that's awesome. And you know, where was everybody when Ferguson blew up? And so it's heartbreaking and tragic on so many levels, and we'll see where this goes.
Yep. And I think it's worthwhile, you know, drawing those comparisons, Meg, because I think people forget that that is a symptom of the white supremacy that's embedded into our systems and cultures. And, you know, we saw it here in Charlottesville in the events of August 12th, when people were so surprised that the police would not engage to protect folks who were protesting. And they said, oh, they must not have had a plan. They must not have known what to do. And, you know, it's so easy to think, oh, that, you know, it's all benign. And you think, no, they knew exactly what to do because they did it in Ferguson, right? They knew how to militarize against protesters. So it's a choice not to. So I think that the complicit part of who shows up for whom really is something that we need to, you know, keep a light on.
But meanwhile, I mean, I have to say, I've never seen Rubio or Trump or any of them show up to be confronted in any kind of way or setting. So I feel like I'm glad that it's happening. And although people are, of course, trolling and attacking, and, you know, the funniest one to me is accusing these kids of being on someone's payroll when they are all on the payroll of the NRA. You know, just, I mean, if I were the kids, that would be one of my talking points. Let's talk about payrolls. What a good thing to talk about, you know. But I kind of love that it's the theater kids, you know. I mean, I just kind of love that. I mean, I don't know about your high schools, but in my high school, the theater kids were kind of the freaks and geeks, you know, and I just, it's wonderful to see the school mobilized behind them and the leadership emerging from there. And, you know, that's not to negate the trauma that they have. And, you know, I see the aftermath of, say, the 4th Precinct takeover here, where there were a whole lot of courageous people who then were just really in trauma. And so I'm thinking about, you know, it's a great use of their anger and everything to be up in arms. And I also hope some healing's going on for them, because, you know, I cannot begin to imagine what it would be like to see teachers and students shot in my presence. But yeah, it's all in there in a mix. I don't know. A lot of trauma.
Since moving to Seattle, both of my children have witnessed shootings. My son saw, he was on a cross-country team and running back. It was at Garfield High School in Seattle. It was another teenager. The child was shot in the arm, the youth. So thankfully, they didn't die. But he saw that. And my daughter was waitressing in South Seattle and saw a drive-by. No one was shot there, but you know, everyone in the restaurant went to the ground. And we've only been here 4.5 years, and they had never. Now, granted, we live in the city, but it's startling. It's startling, and I was definitely really. You could tell my kids were born in Jersey, because my son, when he texted me, said, you know, we're in the school, we're in lockdown. There was a shooting, and then he said, you may have to come get me. So I'm ready to go. And then he texted me back. He said, but don't come yet because the police have cordoned off. And then an hour later, I said, okay, I'm on my way. He goes, no, Mom, I'm good. I'm going to take the bus. And I'm like, okay. So like, you were born in Jersey, and, you know, I'm your mom. So I guess, but I was more shaken. I mean, he was definitely shaken up about it. And, you know, they were good about, you know, talking about it at the school. He goes to an alternative school, but both my kids in the last, both of them happened in the last year and a half. So it's scary.
Are you Minnesota, in the time I was gone, became a concealed carry place, which I didn't know. I kept wondering why I was seeing signs at places that guns weren't acceptable. And then I learned that after Obama came to town, and I was standing in line to get into the place where he was, and behind me was a Black woman, and kind of walking the line yelling at all of us was this white guy in camo clothes. And so he starts yelling at her, and she starts yelling back, and she's like right behind me, and I'm kind of like trying to figure out how to get and do anything here. And the next day he's on the front page, like opening his camo, showing that he just has all these guns. And I thought, oh my God, I just was standing right there, you know, with his anger. And yeah, it's really, it has nothing to do with gun safety. That is not what we're talking about at all. So anyway, well, so here are some people visiting us today who are taking people out into the world to do something. I'm going to turn this over to Christina, who is our host for today.
Well, I just wanted to first thank Heather. Thank you so much for agreeing, for saying yes. So I just wanted to kind of start off framing a little bit about what the UU College of Social Justice is, how it came into being, because I think people sometimes, you know, we have so many acronyms out there, right? That when you start going down, they're like, okay, is that part of the UUSC or what is it? So can you just take us there a little bit, set that?
Absolutely, yes. We are the UU College of Social Justice is a child of the UU Service Committee, UUSC, and the denomination itself, the UUA. And we actually, the two parents of CSJ, we shorten it even, the acronyms, of course, came together just a little over 5 years ago to create the College of Social Justice. So we celebrated our 5-year anniversary in June, this last June here. And it was basically to fill this need to educate Unitarian Universalists and others around social justice issues, and in a way that's not just reading a book. So I think most UUs know, and I'm a UU, we're really good at reading books about stuff. But where we need to kind of grow, or a growing edge for our faith, I think, is to get into that the emotional space sometimes, and actually get proximate, as the term is, to these justice issues, to see them, to feel them, to hear from the people who are most directly affected, and then be able to come home and, you know, pull our levers of power and try to make some change. But where it was really to fill that need of immersion, experiential education in the service of UUSC's goals and, of course, the denomination's goals.
So I get asked this question when I talk about the UU College of Social Justice. Is it an actual college? Is it a place? Is there a campus? Do you go there and take classes? Is there a dining hall? How do I apply?
Yes, we get that question quite a bit as well. We are not an actual college. There's not a degree program. The reason it was named that way was because we felt that we wanted to give the sense, and I'm using the royal we because I was not at the College of Social Justice when this decision was made. But it was to give the sense of the level of education and trying to say, you know, this is just as important to be doing this kind of learning. But our office is in Cambridge, but our learning happens on the Arizona-Mexico border, or in Nicaragua, or in West Virginia, or in Florida, where we place interns. So we don't have a campus itself, but you do go somewhere to learn.
So tell us a little bit about how the UU College of Social Justice is organized in terms of programs and areas of specialty.
Sure. So we do, I guess I'll start with the programming, because I think that tends to be a little bit easier to begin with. The main thing that we do program is that an immersion learning journey. So these are generally week-long trips or journeys to, again, get proximate to a specific issue. I'll talk a little bit more about where we go in a second, which will get into the issues that we deal with. But these are where we're taking a group and we're going to, like I said, the border maybe, and hearing from grassroots partners, hearing from the people most affected by a justice issue, and trying to get spiritually grounded around this, getting into that emotive space, doing worship every day, and then ending with planning, so that we go home and we're taking action at home. So we're not generally, there are some programs where we do a bit of more. We're talking about training and learning, and then the service happens at home. We do that for adults and for youth. So our definition of youth there is 14 to 18. So we also have week-long immersion journeys for youth that go to various places as well. We have programs for young adults specifically. They are our Grounded and Resilient Organizers Workshop. So I'm going to throw another acronym at you because we don't say that every time. Those are the GROW social justice programs. And we actually have 2 coming up soon, one on climate justice and another on racial justice. And so those are specifically for young adults 18 to 35. So we use the UUA's definition of young adult, which is pretty broad. I'm still a young adult in that definition. And we have internship programs. So we work with college age young adults. So again, a little bit more narrow definition of young adults, and partner or pair them with grassroots organizations doing justice work while we give them a framework of spiritual grounding. So for the summer, they're working with, in the past, they've worked with the sanctuaries in DC, which is an amazing organization. So they're doing that work, but then they're also meeting with us to do some reflections and to think about, their identities and how they're bringing that into the space that they're going in and trying to serve in, and what's that going to mean, and how that might come up.
How long do those internships last? Those
are 8 to 10 weeks. So it's kind of, because it's different organizations, it's sort of negotiated with whoever, if they're working with the Center for Ethical Living and Social Justice Renewal, CLFUU for another acronym, or actually this summer we're going to be placing an intern with me, actually, yay. And so it kind of is, once we found the right person, we talk about when they're going to start, but it's generally over the summer for 8 to 10 weeks. Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit more about, I've heard you a couple of times reference that, you all are definitely working with on the ground partners, but also trying to bring the faith-based part of that into it. Because, we've talked on the VUU before, how somehow in UU, the spiritual and social justice get separated, in like they're 2 different things. And so I'm wondering how you all are trying to weave that together.
Yeah, that is everything we do, is trying to weave that together. We believe that to be effective activists for the long haul, you have to have that space, that grounding and that centering place where you can feel, because it's hard work, right? I think I do justice work outside of my job too, and I'm the president of my church, and I'm doing justice work through my church and everything, and it's hard and it's exhausting. And if I didn't have that ritual and the spiritual aspects, burnout's going to happen, or we're going to bring ourselves into a place in a really harmful way, because we just don't have the way to kind of reflect on and deal with those emotions. And so I think, we're trying to, again, bring aspects of worship in there, make the connection between especially our principle, the 7 principles, and what we're doing, so that we're seeing it as a matter of faith. And this is, it's just not something we do. It's part of living our values, and we're also creating community during these weeks. So we're trying to show what that looks like when you're having tough conversations, and how to stay in community, and how that can be helpful for your work. So when people are really, there's a lot of inner turmoil, some things are going to come out, right? And sometimes we're gonna do and say things that are really can be harmful for other people. And how do we deal with that? And how do we make it so that we can stay in a relationship? And maybe try not to do that the next time we're in an activist space.
I want to follow up with that. So the part about, being working in social justice and needing a spiritual practice, I'm on board and I get that. Now, how do you respond to folks who want the spirituality part and not want to talk about social justice? Because that's the part that frustrates me. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I was raised Muslim, and my frame of reference is it's one and the same. You can't be spiritual or have faith without recognizing the harm caused by other humans and even animals on the earth. So that's my question, is how do you respond to those who they just want spirituality and don't want to always think about social justice?
Yeah, I mean, I would love if I could have the right answer for that. I'm still working on that myself. Yeah, it's, in terms of our programs, I think, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but we're lucky in that the people coming to us, the people responding to our outreach for these programs are already kind of like, this is something I'm called to do. And so sometimes we have to push at a different place, I think. For me personally, in my church and as my role there, it's still a conversation I'm working through with people of like, how do we understand that this is Unitarian Universalism, in my opinion. If you are a UU and you believe in the 7 principles, then every single one of them demands that you work for justice, in my opinion. I mean, our society does not recognize the inherent worth and dignity of every person, right? So right off the bat, that means, if we believe that and the world does not reflect that, then it's, my living my values means I have to get that. I have to do something to get us closer to that. And that's activism and social justice work. And it can look differently. And that's maybe that's what I'm trying lately is what that isn't always going to a protest, but, it might be, and this is, I think, sometimes I have the struggle on the other end of, it might be when Black Lives Matter Cambridge has a meeting and they need people to do childcare so that the activists can meet. It's going watching kids, and maybe that's the thing you can give, and that's your social justice, and that's great. Play with the kids, or but find something where you're advancing the cause. So I'm playing around with that of like, you don't have to go to a protest if that's not the thing. But let's talk about where you can bring your gifts and keep moving. So for what it's worth.
It's worth a lot. So you talked a little bit about some of the different programs, and so can you talk a little bit more specifically about where they're going and kind of the partners on the ground? Because I think, at least to me, that's one of the aspects of the UU College of Social Justice that I admire the most is really the deep work that you all are doing with folks who are impacted.
Yeah, as a child of UUSC, we use the eye-to-eye partnership model that they are committed to, which means first and foremost, whenever we make whenever we are trying to be in partnership with a group, we are very conscious of trying to make sure that we're not coming from like, we're going to pay you to do this thing. So we first try to make sure we are keeping and being aware of the fact that there is power structures, and we need to keep in mind that the people we're working with are the people doing the work. And it is something we constantly have to keep in mind. But the one that I think I'd like to talk about first is border journey. So our work with immigration justice. So we go to the Arizona-Mexico border, and our main partner there is BorderLinks. So they're actually an organization sort of like us. They're about educating people in an immersive, experiential way. So they're a fantastic partner. I encourage anyone to go look at what they do. And if you'd like to do a journey, let me know. But they actually connect us with some grassroots partners when we have groups there. So I had the good fortune of leading a journey in October 2016, right before something big happened that kind of changed everything, but didn't really change everything about immigration justice in this country. So we were connected with this fantastic organization called Mariposas Sin Fronteras, Butterflies Without Borders. And because we had enough Spanish speakers on the trip, we were actually able to go visit people being detained in one of the detention centers out in Tucson, and meet with them and talk with them. And often it was the first time anyone had talked to them since they'd been detained, and we were able to get them into Mariposa's system. So that's the kind of service we often do, right? Is Mariposas needs people to go in, meet, and say, where are you on your path? How long have you been detained? Do you have a lawyer? Do you have bond? And we would give that information, and then they could follow up. We would meet with No More Deaths, No Más Muertes, which, again, Google them. They're in the news. There's been a lot of attacks on their work, saving people. And literally, their aim or their goal is to have fewer people die in the desert. Like, that's,
this is the group, just for folks that are listening in or don't know about it. This is the group that actually places water and caches for people who are going through the desert. And if you've been on Facebook or Twitter, you can see Border Patrol actually going and pouring out the water and kicking it over and contaminating it, and just basically making sure that life-saving resource is gone, as part of something that we fund. Like, that is us funding that, in my opinion, terrorist activity in our own borders.
But speaking of terrorist activity, didn't they charge the guy with terrorist activity for leaving water?
I don't know if it was that charge. It was so there is a long-term volunteer of No More Deaths that was charged with he's charged with some felonies for leaving water. So they've kind of I forget the exact charges, but it's something like harboring. Harboring is definitely one of them. So because this man would go out into the desert quite a bit and leave water, leave food, they also are trained to, if they see travelers, if they see, and that's the word they use, travelers or neighbors, they will, direct them to aid stations. They'll give them water. They don't take them in a car and get them across the border or anything. They're just trying to make sure that they're okay. And yes, so, I highly suggest anyone watching, just Google No More Deaths and see what's coming up lately. Because it happened, those charges happened right after a report came out where they basically shared these videos of the Border Patrol destroying water and pouring it out and destroying the food left and all that. So, yeah. Yeah.
I saw about it compared to the Fugitive Slave Act. I mean, and of course, 1070 did that. It said if you were a taxi driver and picked up an immigrant, you were, I don't even know what they call it. It's just horrible.
Right. It's criminalizing saving people's lives. And it's, so it's things like that we on our border trips, we actually go on a desert walk. So you actually get a small sense of what the walk is like. We go with No More Deaths and we leave water with notes of love to try to encourage people. And, I think back to the border trip that I went on, and it was with the Cedar Lane Church in Bethesda and a few other, local people in Bethesda came from different churches. as well as a coworker and her husband up here in Massachusetts. And so the majority of the group was a little older, and this walk took us longer than we expected, and it was hard, and we were all exhausted, and we got to this shrine that is really a shrine for the migrants. So we don't leave things at the shrine. This is for them. This is something, it's a place on their journey. And we were talking about one of the deaths, basically, one of a child that died on her journey. And it was at the beginning of our trip, and it was, it's strange to say this, but it was amazing because it kind of broke everyone open, and it got us. I mean, many of us were crying, and we were able to feel this because we were exhausted and because we'd just been eating like trail mix, and we were feeling what it would be to do this for much longer in worse conditions and not, know if we were going to make it. And you think of, we're thinking about the fact that Border Patrol will use helicopters to scatter groups of migrants, and effectively what that does is it sentences them to die, because now they're no longer with their guide. They might not continue walking north even, so then they can just wander in the desert. And we're thinking about these things, and we're trying to get to feel what's going on for these people who are coming here to escape violence that the United States has mostly created, to escape poverty that the U.S. has mostly created, and then the U.S. says, no, we're not going to, you're escaping the problems we caused, but no, don't come here. And also we're going to use this thing called deterrence through, purposely put walls around near the cities, so that you have to go through the desert. So it's more likely you're going to die. Yeah.
So how do you find that people come away from I would just use Borderlinks in particular, because I think, it's one of the better known programs of College of Social Justice. Is there any kind of follow-up with folks? I mean, how do you feel like people are coming out of this?
Yes, we are continuing to work on that. But, for example, the Cedar Lane group, I went with them in October 2016. They declared that, as that group came away before the election, very energized. We were all incredibly energized to work on this. Personally, immigration justice became my top justice issue after this journey. And I, coming in as very committed social justice activist at that point, chair of the social justice committee at my church, working for a social justice organization, and it actually shifted my priorities, to the point where I'm doing a little bit of I'm starting to do accompaniment work now. So, many people come in energized, and we are using the last day to really talk about what are we going to do when we get back. The Cedar Lane group, their commitments were to preach in front of the entire congregation, so they knew what was happening, to spread the word amongst the rest of the congregation, and to connect with local organizations doing it. So they've been, they were going to protests. I met with them when I went down to the march on the day after the inauguration. They turned up there. They've turned up for other marches that are actually that were majority people of color doing immigration protesting, and they were going and saying, we're just going to be here and show up for you. And they declared themselves sanctuary after this. And then they got another group to go so that more people in the church would have that engagement and that feeling and continue the work. So we, just this past October, another group from Cedar Lane went and did the work. They'll keep that process going. We had a group from Davis, California that was starting a little differently. They've been doing some really amazing work in their community. And they went to make sure they could, again, to see what it was like on the border. And now, with the Love Resist campaign, we have more places to connect people to so that they can continue that work. We have it's not set in stone yet, but there will be coming out soon. Notice of the next webinar for Love Resist about accompaniment work specifically. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it can be, going to immigration court to support people. I did this in Massachusetts, so there are immigration courts all over the country. And sitting in the court and being there so that when the judge sees that there are people who love and support our neighbors who are being detained, writing letters of support for people saying, I will give this person a ride to their appointments. I will, they have a home here. Even if you don't know them well, you just say, I love them and I want them here. I don't need to know more about them to say that. I had the extreme privilege to, collect the money for a detained person and to bond him out of detention. It was one of the best things I think I've ever done in my life, to be able to hand this money order over and have this person get out of prison. And so, we're connecting people to those learning opportunities because we are connected to UUSC and UUA, where, whenever there's a Love Resists program, we're saying, hey, go do this. Continue this work, and we are hoping we're trying to up our alumni engagement work in general of making sure that we're keeping those connections and keeping in touch with people. So,
Aisha, you had a question?
Yeah, I actually now have two questions, but one is, it sounds like the partnering is one way to kind of minimize the white savior syndrome, which I have seen is prevalent among white liberals and UUs. So that is good to hear. I guess my big question, systemically, is when folks engage in this way through the College of Social Justice, do you then talk about white supremacy culture and what, the idea that we are based in white supremacy, which is why we want to welcome people from Norway and keep Black and brown people out or kick them out. So is that something that you all in any way, or did you find, like Cedar Lane, are folks more willing to talk about white supremacy culture and how, just in general, based on their experience?
Yeah, great question. We actually, all of our programs use the frame of racial justice. So it doesn't, we have some programs that are racial justice focused, but everything, whether they're immigration, climate, we're talking racial justice. And in fact, one of the things we have is we have this study guide that we ask people to go through before they journey. And we have an entire section called the white savior problem. We are doing identity work. We are asking people to think about how they are in this space. We have videos and prompts that are trying to get us at this point where we understand, especially the white folks, because again, the majority of the UUs going on these trips are older white folks, right? I'm a UU, a white upper middle class, that's how I was raised person, and so I bring baggage and I bring power dynamics into spaces. So yes, we are always going to do that work, and it's not always comfortable for the people that are coming on our programs with us, but we do push it. Again, in a loving way, we're trying to get people to take the next step and to keep working on that and to reflect. But every program has some identity work in it, so we recognize what we're bringing into spaces and how, especially as majority white, majority highly educated, majority wealthier, majority raised in North America, in United States. And so like we go to Nicaragua. How are, even when we have, we do have people of color coming on our trips, but a person of color from North America going to Nicaragua has different things coming with them. And so, yes, every program has that. So thank you for asking that.
So Meg has a question, then I have a question.
So it sounds like some congregations send whole groups there, and then also do some individuals just come on their own? And I'm curious about when they go back home. Those are two really different things to figure out, what your congregation can do and then what you do if you just went by yourself, and what you notice when people get home.
Yeah, the majority of our programs are because a congregation comes to us and says, we have a group of adults or a group of youth who want to have this experience together. And you're absolutely right. It's very different when we have that congregational group, because they do have a built-in sense of support, right? And it's not just you coming back and trying to push this work forward. But we do also have some open enrollment journeys where individuals come. We have actually one coming up specifically for religious professionals, so ministers, seminarians, and religious educators, because we know they can often energize their congregation, and it is different for them. We just had a group from Nicaragua that, again, were not in the same congregations. It was an open enrollment program. And, it's different with every group. They do build community while they're there. And we do ask people if they've kept in touch. And we often have, if they haven't kept in touch with everyone, they usually have like a person that they've kind of kept with, at least when they respond to our surveys, that they have someone that they like Facebook friended, and they'll share information. Sometimes we've had groups, share, get into a Facebook group. They make their own Facebook group or something, or we've made it for them and they'll share information. But it is definitely different. You have, and it's still possible to come back, do the work, right? Again, I would say as a person who led them home, and no one else in my congregation had done this. So coming back, even though I was leading it, I experienced it just the same. And so I had to do different work. I was trying to share the message in my congregation a lot more than kind of immediately make partner connections with immigration justice work, because I'm trying to get the people there to see it, or or we did some events, working with, there's an immigration attorney in my congregation. So we did a Know Your Rights event. So we did some of that, but it's just different. It's more like, how do we get the rest of the congregation to kind of understand your journey and what happened, versus now we have a working group. We effectively have a committee that can start making these connections and start doing work while also trying to bring other people in. But you're just kind of in a different part of the process, I think.
So I wanted to give you an opportunity also to talk about youth programs specifically. I was just this past weekend at the UU congregation in Pittsburgh that did the Activate Youth training, and that was fabulous. It was wonderful, and the youth were like, "Oh, is there more?" So wanted to, I know, right? Yay! So just wanted to have you talk a little bit about what that can look like.
Yeah, so we are just a little bit about the Pittsburgh one. This was actually something fairly new for us. It's called Activate Your Community, and it was a partnership with the Central East region. So we're really trying to work, again, even partnering with UU organizations or departments to try to expand our reach. But we have, you don't have to be part of a youth group to go on a journey. We have a lot of those journeys, but we also every summer have at least 2 open enrollment Activate programs. And these, again, are for youth 14 to 18 who were in high school in the school year preceding the summer. So you could have just graduated if you're 18 and you can still go to Activate. But if you're 14 and you were in 8th grade, that's just how we kind of shift it. And this summer we have Activate New Orleans, Racial Justice and Beloved Community. And we have Activate Tucson, Immigration Justice. as open enrollment programs. It's for youth, I think it's fantastic, especially if you're in a small congregation. Sometimes you're like the only youth of your age range. You know, again, I'm from a fairly small congregation, and we're going to have a lot of youth in one age range because we had like 9 babies born one year. But we have like 2 teenagers, you know, and so you get to actually travel to this place, be doing this work, learning more about activism, about racial justice or immigration justice, but again, getting general activism training as well. And you're with youth, or youth, as I like sometimes, from across the country. You know, one training, the youth from India come, which was fantastic. It was great to have that viewpoint. And, you know, I forgot to say this before, we have scholarship funds because we want to make this accessible. We know that Unitarian Universalists, again, tend to be wealthier, but not all of them, right? We don't want to say like, only if you're wealthy can you do these things. So we have, for our youth programs, we can cover up to 75% of the cost with that scholarship money. And it's all based on need. It is a little first come, first serve, because we don't have all the money in the world, as you would imagine as a nonprofit, but we do have scholarships to help people get there. For adults, we can cover up to 50%. So, you know, we want everyone to be able to do this. We don't want this to be a situation where, you know, we continue that separation between, you know, people who have access to resources and people who don't. And yeah, so those summer programs are coming up. The applications are open. We would love, love, love to have them fully staffed. We know youth are doing amazing things. So as you guys were talking about, you know, at the very beginning of the show, is, you know, we shouldn't rely, like, the youth don't have to do everything, right? I'm hearing a lot of this, like, the youth are so great, we don't have to do anything. And I'm like, no, we've obviously failed them because this stuff is happening. So like, let's continue to do our work. But youth are also amazing activists, and they have power and ideas and passion for things that are going to be able to push our world forward and closer to what we want to do, or what we want to be together. And so we want to be a part of that. We want to give them these opportunities.
My favorite thing about youth is they don't overthink it. Like, okay, politicians, you're taking money from the NRA, stop and pass these gun laws. I mean, they're just kind of, and they're going with it, with this mission.
Yeah, absolutely. They, you know, the youth that we've worked with, it's just, I think because they haven't had those structures put around them, right? Or they've had fewer of the structures. Everyone has structures from like the moment you're born put around you, boxing you in, but they have fewer of them. So they're like, okay, well, this is what we want the world. This seems to be the most direct way to get there. Let's just do that.
You know, I've just recently, twice only, gone to hearings here, just this factory deportation thing that's going on about 2 miles from my house, it turns out. And I've been thinking how useful it would be, because I'm just doing it, to have a reflection group about it. And so I'm trying to stir up a little action at the church I go to here, not the church I serve, because that's everywhere. But I'm curious, you know, what kind of support people end up giving to each other. I mean, you've been to them, obviously. I know that that's part of the border tour. It's like being in Nazi Germany. That's the only thing I can say about it. And I just wonder what kind of support you see congregations that do come back and do that kind of work, what you see them building for each other, because we really need to be there. It's a really good place for white people, especially, to be sitting there. And I've been told it makes a difference. And but so the one thing is to get people there. But then the other deeper question I have is sustaining people who are going there, and what kind of ritual and what kind of small group, or what do you see us sustaining that kind of work?
Yeah, that's that's why we do the worship every day. Honestly, we're trying to model the things that will help you process this as you continue the work. We try to check in. We'd love to hear stories. We have, our newsletters where people are getting pastoral messages or messages about new programming or avenues for their work. We hope people stay connected. But during our time together, we'll do things like, do sort of a structure that's similar, shorter, but similar to a kind of a UU type service. So, I would lead some of these where I, do opening reading, and we'd do a chalice lighting, and then we'd reflect on what we heard. So we're bringing in this, this sense of worship and the space of worship. But then just using that space or that container to talk about how it made us feel, what came up for us. And then having a closing and kind of trying to do that weaving that we talked about before of social justice and worship. I got some great feedback during our program, which again is, we love feedback even during the time, and changed up my plan for one of the last worship ones. And it's, we ended up doing a walking meditation. We gave people a few different questions, just one each, but split them into about 3 different groups and just asked them to just think about that question as they walked to this beautiful park at night, and this beautiful weather, and then they sat down and they talked about that question, and we're bringing different pieces of what worship could look like, or how you could respond to these things, and we're hoping that people are taking that back and saying, I don't need to be in church to do a reading to get myself centered before I go to a protest, and I don't have to, I can talk about these things with someone else from the group, or I can journal them. If I need to process my thoughts, I can do that. And that's part of the work. It's not separate from it. It's not like, oh, okay, well, I did the work and now maybe I'll do this to make myself feel better. It's that, trying to say this is the work, and continuously going back and saying, like, was I there in that space in an appropriate way, and what did it bring up for me, and what might that mean for the next time I go to that space?
So I like to ask this question, but so if folks want to support the work of the UU College of Social Justice, maybe somebody doesn't feel like they can go on a trip, but would like to make that trip available for other people, or how could they support your work?
Yeah, we do. You can always donate, right? Every nonprofit's like, donates. There is a space. But I'd also say, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, sign up for our newsletter so that you're hearing about things. So when it does come up, you can come. It's use our resources. Anyone can use the study guide if they want to, which is very in depth. But we also have these like shorter ones. We have an immigration justice study guide that is a movie screening. Like it has everything you need to do a movie screening, and it has some of these identity questions, but also gets into immigration justice information so that if you can't go to the border, you can still learn, share our stuff. We have, one of the things I didn't mention is we do place skilled volunteers with some of our partner organizations. And one of the big ones that we need help sharing is our partnership with Raices in San Antonio, Texas. So they help the women and children detained in Carnes. And our volunteers, we need Spanish speakers to go and interview these women and children so they get their credible fear interviews. The process to get asylum is you have to have this credible fear interview and prove that you are afraid enough and the situation is dire enough. But no one, the government doesn't provide translators. So if you don't have a Spanish speaker, you don't speak English, you can't prove it. So, we have dates in April, May, June, July, and August for people. We want to connect people and get them down there to do this work. And so, I am working on my Spanish fluency, but I'm not fluent enough, but I'm sharing it because I know people in my network speak Spanish, are fluent in Spanish. And that is a great way to help us out and to help our partners out, is just to share these things, let people know they're available. That we fill more journeys, programs when people know about it. And people are getting the tools they need to be better, more effective activists when they go on these journeys, and they, and do these trainings. And so, yeah, donate, but I don't want it to be a fully, we don't want to be transactional either. So be in relationship with us. That's how you can help, is, just chill out with us on the internet and such.
I appreciate that. Any last words of wisdom, or that you need to make sure that everybody knows about the UU College of Social Justice?
Yeah, I mean, the big, I mentioned it, the Border Witness for religious professionals. If you know a religious professional that would be interested in this, or are a religious professional who would be interested, please check it out. But I think, I want to find, my coworker said something absolutely amazing yesterday. So this is my coworker, Gina Collignon, who is the Senior Associate for Immersion Learning. And she said yesterday, it's one thing to read a book, and it's another thing to emotionally involve yourself with another human being. And that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to get it to that point. And so if you're interested in emotionally involving yourself with another human being and having the reason, more a more emotional connection to these justice issues, check us out. Ask us questions. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. You can vickery@ucsj.org, and let me know what you're thinking, and let's try to find a way for you to connect.
Thanks so much. And Jessica just put in our notes that links to all the links that you provided and talked about will be in the YouTube notes and is on our Twitter feed. So thank you so much for coming out. And Meg, do you want to tee up our hyphen series?
Sure, we are. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you. I can't agree with you more about getting the heart involved along with the mind and the body. So we are going to be doing in the spring for the next couple months, not every week, but a lot of our weeks, we're going to be doing and we did this once before, a mini series, which is fun. We're going to have Unitarian Universalists who have different theological and cultural, philosophical landing places come and talk about how they see the world. So our first one of those is going to be next week. We're going to talk about UU Christianity. We know that Jake Morrow will be here. Jake is the president of the UU Christian Fellowship, and we have some other guests that we're hoping will show up. I kind of want to name them to guilt them, but I won't. But we're working on other guests too. And we'll be doing that series for the next few months. So we're excited about it. It's been wonderful always to be with all of you, and may you have spiritual practices to sustain you during this coming week.